if you want to own a business, but don't have your own idea of what the product, service, or solution is, or don't know how to execute it, a franchise is a great way to have the best of both worlds where you own it, but you have people who are there telling you what the recipes and the trade secrets are and assisting you along the way.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi, my name is Rick Nusky and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's wonderful to have you with us today. I have somebody very exciting lined up for you, but before we jump into that, thank you so very much for your feedback. It's wonderful knowing that the show is making a difference for you. Now, on today's call, we're going to be talking all things franchising with Scott Greenberg, who is a franchise performance consultant. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Absolutely wonderful to have you here. Now, I've been looking at your bio, not your background because it's red brick. and Scott and I just touched on a few things prior to the call. And this is going to be a very, very revealing call for those who are interested in franchising, but don't know necessarily much about it. But Scott, what we like to do is we take a bit, walk a bit backwards from the business per se, and we talk a bit about you personally. And I'd love to start off by asking you, being so busy, is there much time for recreation for you personally? And if you do have time for recreation, what is it that you like to do?
There's always time for recreation. One of the things, not to jump into my book, but one of the things, that I write about, is the value of time. If you're too busy to have recreation, whatever that means for you, there's something wrong with the way your life is set up. So I do make time for it. During the pandemic, I think I've watched everything on Netflix. So I have enjoyed that. When I can, I like to hike. I love to travel with my family. I love to watch my son play basketball. So love to hang out with my wife. So there's a lot that we like to do. And the pandemic has cut into some of it, but fortunately not all of it.
And that's wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing. Now, that's one thing we'll certainly be talking about later on, Scott, is your wonderful book. But want to know a little bit more about in terms of what got you into franchising, into business. And I was wondering if we can start there.
Sure. So long before I ever bought my first franchise, I was a professional speaker doing a combination of motivational keynote speaking and leadership training. And that was going very well. And I was, traveling a lot and getting paid well and meeting all kinds of people. But I was married and my wife and I were starting a family. And I realized I want to keep doing it, but I'd like to travel a little bit less. So I need another stream of income. And the other thing that occurred to me is a lot of people in my audiences had a lot more actual experience leading people than I had. And here I am telling them what to do. And that always bothered me. I didn't want to be one of those speakers or consultants who's never actually done it. So my thought was, well, if I can then, get another business, another stream of income, it can be a laboratory for me as well as a source of income. And when I had that thought, my father just happened to show me an airline magazine with an ad for a company called Edible Arrangements, which I hadn't heard of at the time, but I saw a picture of this big, gorgeous floral arrangement made of fresh fruit. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So, longer story, a little less long, I ended up buying what would be my first. And from the very beginning, the goal was for it to be a laboratory, to not just have a successful business, but really learn what does it take to be successful. And the good news is I still had my income from speaking. I didn't have quite the same financial pressures as other franchisees do, which gave me more room to breathe, more room to experiment and ask big questions. And that curiosity really served me well. So I figured if I could learn how to run a business, then I could help others learn how to run theirs. And that quickly led to me getting invitations to give presentations for franchisees of other brands, which led me to what I do now, which is I do, full-time speaking and coaching for other franchise systems. And I always interview their top franchisees to find out what makes them great. And you interview enough of them, you start to see the same things over and over again. So that's what inspired the book and all the work that I do. But for 10 years, I was a multi-unit franchisee myself. We built the first one. We took over the second one from someone who was struggling and turned it around and made it profitable using the things I learned experimenting with the first one. So that's how I got into it, and that's what the experience was. It was an emotional and financial roller coaster, but ultimately it was very successful, and I'm very grateful for that experience and where it's taken me.
Thank you for sharing. I'd love to take a bit of a deep dive into, I guess, emotion and process and all of these, I guess, mechanical components to being a franchisee in a moment. But if we can come back to edible arrangements for a moment, you not only, I guess, did very well, you've done exceptionally well. You had won the edible arrangement best customer service manager of the year, and these are all, I guess, human elements, human aspects to running a franchise. I'm wondering, your speciality is essentially the operational side, the human side. Would that be fair?
Well, you're half right.
Right.
So what I tell people is there's three factors that impact how our businesses do. Our circumstances, such as the economy, the competition, government regulation, or the pandemic, and we don't control those things. There's the operations, which is what we pay our franchisor to teach us, which is the sales and the marketing and the recipes and all the stuff that keeps us busy. And then the third factor are the human elements, the way the franchisee thinks, the way they lead, and the way they serve, all that people stuff. And when you're able to master those three things, well, then you execute operations at a higher level. So my area of interest is on that third element, the human side, and how it impacts operations.
Right. Fantastic. I wonder if we can, I guess, go back to the foundational elements because a lot of the My Future Business audience are hungry for information. They may not necessarily know what franchising is at its core. I was wondering if you could share what franchising is.
Yeah, it's such a great question because I think it's often misunderstood even by legislators.
Hmm.
And there are problems because of that. So a franchise business is basically where you go to an entity that owns all the rights and the recipes and the proprietary information. You pay one flat fee for the right to open a business under their name and get trained. And then once you are up and running, then you pay them, and this is the most common model. There are other versions, but you pay them an ongoing royalty. I think the
Right.
average is 6% of your gross sales for the right to continue operating under their name, using their best practices, working at their standards. And then they assist you in every element of the business, innovating, help with marketing, and they're sort of there with you. As franchisors like to say, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So that McDonald's, that Dunkin' Donuts, that any number of brands, it's independently owned and operated, but they're held to standards by a corporate office. They pay a royalty to that corporate office, and they get support from that corporate office. So if you want to own a business, but don't have your own idea of what the product, service, or solution is, or don't know how to execute it, a franchise is a great way to have the best of both worlds where you own it, but you have people who are there kind of telling you, what the recipes and the trade secrets are and assisting you along the way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now, just for context for everybody who's on the call with us today, Scott is not green in this field. You've worked with the likes of McDonald's, Great Clips, Anytime Fitness, which I love and I'm a member of, Wyndham Hotels, REMAX, and the list goes on and on and on. So the most famous of models that we hear about, obviously, would be McDonald's. There are lots of other success stories, and you have worked globally on franchising. I'm wondering, is franchising different from country to country? Have you noticed any variations?
Yes. And there's so many variations because of what the laws are, because of what the customs are, but the laws even change from state to state. So if a franchise wants to do business, here in the US, they have to file different paperwork in every single state. And many franchises don't operate in every state. And then it just gets, as we get global, it just, the differences just get bigger and bigger, and there's too many to speak of.
Hmm.
The important thing to understand, what they all have in common is it's a common brand. And so as a franchisee, you own your business, but you're also part of a brand. And that is a struggle in every franchise system because some franchisees get that more than others. And when you deviate from the brand, the way they do things, you weaken the brand, which is not good. So that's one thing that no matter where you are, if it's a franchise, you have your business, but you're part of something bigger than your business.
Yes, absolutely. I know that you've had exposure to literally thousands of different brands. What are some of the best franchising examples that come to your mind, putting McDonald's to the side?
Well, some of the ones that you mentioned are great. I love Anytime Fitness. And when I got my book deal, the first person I thought of to write the foreword for the book was Chuck Runyon, who is the CEO and co-founder. And forget the fact they have a good product,
Mm-hmm.
which are these gyms that, of which you're a part of. They are so about the culture of the organization. Their franchisees are just fanatics for the brand. There's like deep love, as they say, we bleed purple, which is their branding color.
Oh, yeah.
And they're very deliberate about that. Every company in the world has a mission statement and values that they put up on the website or slap up on a wall, and usually it's ignored. They live and breathe their values and their mission, which is to improve the self-esteem of the world. Their parent company is actually called Self-Esteem Brands. So they're not out to increase the size of people's muscles. They're there trying to improve people's self-esteem, and they truly are doing that. So that's one brand that I really love. Another client of mine that I love for the same reason, much smaller, based here in California, called Pride Staff. They're a staffing franchise,
Mm-hmm.
but again, they're all about their mission, which is honoring their clients' values and really getting franchisees to buy into that. So there are a number of franchises of all different sizes, and there are a number of things that make them great. And it usually has very little to do with the specific product, service, or solution that they offer. It's more about how they run and the relationship that exists between the franchisor and the franchisees and their loyalty to their customers and the service they provide.
So the product is actually just the byproduct of a good culture, essentially.
I really think that that is the case, and a lot of folks don't get that. They just think, "Wow, this is great frozen yogurt. It must make for a great business." Well, it's not that simple.
No, of course
That
not.
yogurt has to be sold,
Yeah.
and there's all these elements behind the scenes that people don't appreciate. And so I would tell it, any of your listeners who are interested in franchising, don't just check out the what the product that's sold. Really try to get to know all the players who are involved in the culture of the company before you bite in, because you're buying into that culture. You're going to become part of it, and the culture either lifts you up or it'll pull you down, and that might make all the difference between becoming a wealthy franchisee and one who's really suffering.
This exposes a long list of questions that I have popping into my mind. But first, I'd love to learn about dealing with failure. Surely, somewhere along the line, you've had experiences as a franchisee in terms of failure. Could you tell us some of your most memorable experiences and what you took away from that was positive?
Sure. Well, I think that failure is a necessary ingredient in the recipe of success.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going through it and you're experiencing the adversity, experiencing the fear and the loss and the shame and the embarrassment, you don't know it, but we really can't judge our experiences by how pleasant they are. The only way to know the value is to have time go by and realize, okay, that was just me learning a lesson. That was me moving on a different path. So, with edible arrangements, we had operational problems, and sometimes I had financial problems. I wish I went into it with more working capital.
Mm-hmm.
There were times where it was tight and I wasn't able to pay myself. I always paid my employees first, but there were days where, because of not the best money management on my part, the bills would come in and I have to triage them to determine who I was going to pay and who I wasn't. One failure in particular, which really was devastating is a strong word, but it was extremely upsetting for me because I was so loyal to our customers and cared so much about their experience. It was Valentine's Day. And I volunteered to be in charge of dispatching all of our deliveries, of which there were um,
Lots.
just an enormous number. Any given day, we could get by with one or two delivery drivers. This holiday, I think we had 30 or 40,
Oh,
if you can
wow.
imagine. And so, and plenty of orders. So I was in charge of dispatching. Well, without getting into the weeds and all the details of it,
Mm-hmm.
I made some operational errors. And suddenly we couldn't track the orders. We didn't know if they had been made, if they were in the cooler, a delivery van, if they'd been delivered. So as the day is going by, people start calling saying, hey, my wife hasn't gotten the fruit basket yet. Is it there? And it got worse and worse. And we ended up failing to deliver dozens of orders.
Oh, wow.
And that was just a nightmare. It was all my fault. And it was something that could have been prevented if I was more on top of it and if I was more prepared. So we learned a lot. We learned a lot about dealing with angry customers, that experience.
No, but that's quite vital for us to understand, because there are a lot of startups here, a lot of people that don't actually have that experience. You can't buy experience. You have to, go through that experience in real time, in real life, with dissatisfied customers. Obviously, in this case, and it's, I guess, positions you far better to be someone who has that credibility. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, one of the nice things about experience is then you have context for everything. So once you fail a couple times, you realize that even in the middle of it, it feels like the end of the world.
Hmm.
It's really just a bad moment. And you can usually bounce back. That's the nice thing that comes with, age and experience, I guess, is that you realize that you can bounce back from things and that you can learn from things. There's a tendency in business ownership to catastrophize everything.
Oh yeah.
It's your time, it's your money that's invested. The stakes seem so high. And so a problem, suddenly you catastrophize, you expect the worst things to happen, and it really takes an emotional toll on you. So with experience, you get thicker skin, a little bit more business maturity, and that really helps.
Thank you for sharing this sage advice and some of your experiences. It's wonderful. I wonder about the type of person that might be well aligned to be a franchisee. Is franchising for everyone?
Franchising is not for everyone. And not only that, but I would say there is no one franchise brand that is right for all potential franchisees. So even if you have the right sensibility for franchising, you still have to find the right company and the right concept for you. In my book, I interviewed some incredible franchisors, and the really big ones, the really great ones, only sell to a small percentage of people who want to buy. They hold potential franchisees to high standards because they're building a culture. But I spoke to a vice president of development for a franchise brand just a few days ago, and I asked her the question about how many people she weeds out because they're not a cultural fit. And she says, well, in franchise sales, we never use the phrase weeding out.
Mm.
Our our mission is to make people happy, or whatever their canned mission is. And why would we deprive that of anyone? So we'll sell to anyone, even if the people are tough. We'll work through it. And well, she's saying that because she's in sales. She's not in operations having to deal with those people.
Oh.
Essentially, what she's saying is they're right for everyone. That's a predatory mentality that I don't appreciate. So
Mm.
we have to be very careful. So not every franchise is right for every potential franchisee, and franchising isn't right for everyone. Business ownership is not right for everyone. And even if business ownership is right for you, it doesn't mean that franchising is, because unlike a mom and pop shop, the franchise, you're being held to standards by a franchisor. They're collecting a royalty. They get to say yes or no to a number of things. You don't have full control compared if you were a mom and pop. And if you need to have full control and you're not interested in being held to compliance standards, you might have a difficult time navigating that environment. So you really have to search your soul and really understand the relationship and read the franchise agreement to see, does that align with the lifestyle that you want?
And this kind of leads into my next comment and question with, let's say Anytime Fitness, I'm a fanatic about, getting involved with that brand for my own self, my fitness, my well-being. Would that make me better aligned in terms of the culture at least? Is that some way to look at it? If you have no idea, you're as green as the grass is long, but you've got this idea, hey, look, I want some help with the franchise, but I just don't know if I'm a good fit. Well, I guess what sort of a process do you go through to identify those people?
So a sub-industry of the franchise industry are consultants and brokers and coaches whose job it is to match potential franchisees with opportunities.
Hmm.
And some of the more sophisticated ones will do a whole assessment of the aspiring franchisee to help determine what might be a good fit for them. And that assessment goes way beyond, hey, what are you interested in? It really gets into their values and their sensibility. And one guy I talked to, who's one of the top franchisees within his brand, um, he said in a million years, he never would have guessed that he would be into kitchen remodeling, which is what this concept is. He's not his background,
Hmm.
but the assessment indicated it would be a good match for him, and now he loves it. So it might be, yes, you're interested in that product or that service, but the marketing and the selling of a product and service and managing employees and customer service has very little to do with what the product is itself. So just because you love surfing doesn't mean you'd enjoy owning a surf shop, because
Ah,
running a business is very different than enjoying the product that you're selling. So it might, so yeah, if you're interested in fitness, maybe you're going to pay closer attention and, you'll be able to do more reading about it, that kind of thing. But being interested in fitness and running a gym and marketing it, they're two very different things. And it's important to understand that.
absolutely. Using the Anytime Fitness example, I'm wondering, let's say that I progressed and I was successful and they said, look, you're a good fit for us. And I've worked with consultants and they've said, look, green lights, all ticks in the boxes, as it were. What is the process once I've been approved as a franchisee, typically?
So most brands will vet you financially. The more sophisticated brands will vet you culturally. And then they will usually send you some kind of email or make a phone call or a letter congratulating you. And it's kind of funny. They're congratulating you that you have won the opportunity to write them a big check and buy a franchise. They try to position it that way.
Yep.
So if so, you're usually going to go to a discovery day, and
Hmm.
these days it's virtual, but traditionally you'll go to the corporate office and you'll hear a presentation, and they'll let you know what opportunities are available, and they'll give you the franchise disclosure document, which reveals everything about the brand that they're required to share, including the lawsuits that are there, and just reveals everything. Assuming you get through all that stuff and you want to do it, then you'll sign a franchise agreement and you'll write a check for a franchise fee, which gives you the right to do that. And then you're off and running. Then you'll go through some kind of training. You'll go through some kind of process. If it's a retail or a brick and mortar, you'll obviously then do site selection and try to find a place and sign a lease and do a build out. And they hold your hand through the whole process. It also involves you obviously getting your financing in place. Some franchise brands will offer some assistance. Most don't. Um, but otherwise, assuming that you have, the money lined up, then they'll hold your hand throughout the process and get you up and running. Often they'll have an on-site presence during the first week or two that you're open. In my case, edible arrangements, we had a person there for our first week, making sure we were okay. It's always the second week that's scariest when they're gone. That's when you're
No.
truly on your own. But they're always just a phone call or an email away. But what gets the process started once you've been vetted is you sign a franchise agreement and you write a check for the franchise fee, and then it's off to the races.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'd love to reflect on your personal experiences because going back to that, having to find the perfect location, you often see the large McDonald's and the Hungry Jacks and Burger Kings and all the rest of it on corner allotments. Do they help you find the right location, or is that entirely up to you?
It varies from brand to brand.
Right.
So in some cases, they might even sell you a location that is already exists.
Oh.
And perhaps it's a franchisee who's running it, but they want to get out.
Hmm.
Perhaps it's a franchisee who got booted from the system and they want someone else to take it over. So sometimes that's the case. What's nice about that is that you can walk right into it. They hand you the keys and you're off and running. You might pay a bit more for that, but you have, immediate income. In other cases, you do have to find a location. So some franchisees or franchisors are very involved in that process. Others are not. In my case with edible arrangements, I literally every day was driving the territory that I bought, which was a series of zip codes here in Southern California.
Hmm.
And I just scoured the streets and went on the internet looking for, commercial space available. And then once I found it, then I took pictures and filled out a form and had to get approval from my corporate office. And then once I had their approval, then I was able to sign a lease. So it really varies from brand to brand, and that's a question that all potential franchisees should ask before signing on. Is that part of what the franchisor will help with? But all of them will certainly give the specifications for what constitutes a good location.
Right. There's some really good, strong upsides to this. You've got existing brands, you've got proven processes for the most part, I guess, for the more mature brands that are out there. You've got that support. Everything's, almost like a hand holding sort of experience, isn't it? From start to finish.
Ideally, and
Ideally.
that's important. That's important, Rick, because here's the thing. Most franchise brands that have been around, they have a proven track record. So to me, what makes for a good franchisor, it really means to prove the concept is that they have done it at least 3 or 4 times in 3 or 4 different markets. There are some franchises that have only built one and they immediately start franchising and they haven't proven that it can be replicated,
Uh,
but they're good at selling and marketing and branding. And they have people who are willing to write a lot of money when it hasn't been proven. And I've seen so many franchisees regret signing that agreement, and franchisors have gone bankrupt because they haven't proven a concept. I recently had a phone call with a guy who, if you go to the website for the brand he's franchising, it's not about it's not like a retail website where it's promoting the store. It's just promoting a franchising. He hasn't even opened his own, and
oh,
he's already trying to sell franchises.
huh.
I would tell
Nah.
people to be really careful
Yeah, absolutely.
about that. So once again, I think most people in franchising are honest, care about franchisees, but it's like anything else, not all of them. So I don't think you want to be the first person to buy a franchise. You want to be at least the fourth or fifth, in my opinion.
I'm digging deep into your expertise, and I'd love to know a little bit about the process behind approaching a bank with the knowledge that you want to start a franchise. How do banks respond to this, and what is the process that is to be followed? Is it like any other application?
I think it is. I think generally, if you are someone who has decent credit and you want to buy a proven brand, they're probably going to be a bit more open than if you have good credit, but you want to start something brand new.
Mm.
If you're investing in something that has a track record, they like that. And especially if it's something where there are going to be assets and things that can be used as collateral, they like that as well. In many cases, franchises, why they don't provide financing, they might have relationships with banks that really like that brand and have good history and are going to be a little bit more lenient. But ultimately, it is up to the franchisee to secure that financing. So it's obviously you need to come in with credit. Obviously, you need to come in with a certain amount of your own cash,
Hmm.
just like if you're buying a house, you're putting in the equity.
Deposit.
They like it more if you're actually going to be working on it, involved. It's not just an investment. Um, and they like the fact, that if it's a proven brand. So it's like any other kind of loan. The more stability that you can present to the bank, I think the more favorable they're going to be, and the greater the chances they're going to provide that funding.
Thank you for sharing. Now, I wonder, I can only lean on your experiences with edible arrangements. What is it like to hire your first employee?
Well, I came in a little bit cocky when I first hired employees. And the reason for that, Rick, was that I was a motivational speaker.
Of course.
So I just assumed that my motivational magic would kick in and employees would just be inspired. And what I quickly found out is they don't care that there's no I in team. To them, that's just a comment on spelling. There's
Hmm.
nothing, real about. None of those motivational cliches worked. These are people who are coming for an hourly wage. And, so when I had a first staff meeting and I took out a whiteboard and I said, let's brainstorm our values. And they looked at me like,
Huh?
what? You
Righto.
know, so I really had to dial that back. And rather than expect them to meet me where I was at, I had to let go of all that and meet them where they were at. Um, but it was exciting to have that first team. And that first team lasted about 24 hours. The second day we were open, 3 people didn't show up.
Oh, wow.
And I was told to expect that. I was told hire way more than you think you're going to need. And that turned out to be the case. So, but once we did it, again, like everything else, it was through trial and error. And we knew how to market the business more for hiring. We could describe more accurately what the job was like. We knew more what we were looking for and who would last. There were a lot of people who had a value system that wasn't consistent with ours, and they valued great things. There are people who value creativity. They didn't do well with edible arrangements. And I love creativity, but the work is actually less creative than you think. It's very monotonous. We tell you exactly where to put every strawberry.
Yep.
So
Yep.
people who are creative, they didn't like it. People who value education, college students didn't do well, for the same reasons. And so we were clear about what values we could honor and what we couldn't. And that helped us better recognize the right kinds of employees. So in the beginning it was exciting, and I had all these aspirations of we're going to be a family, and it kind of happened, but there was some reality that was there as well for me. So it was a work in progress, but eventually we were able to build the kind of team I wanted.
Do you find that with the pandemic and the likes that anybody who's running a franchise, do they have, I wouldn't call them masterminds, but heads of franchises coming together and sharing ideas online. Do you communicate between franchisees? Is that a thing?
It is. So there are some franchise systems that have what are called performance groups among them.
Right.
So it's a group of franchisees who talk on a regular basis. Some franchisees are part of other networking groups, other performing groups that are a mixture of different, people of different backgrounds from different brands and even different industries.
Hmm.
Um, Most reputable franchisors are members of the International Franchise Association, IFA, and they're able to network with each other and provide ideas and support and all that. I'm actually working on a program that I'm going to be offering to franchisees, which has a social element to it where people are able to negotiate and offer mutual support, that kind of thing. And I would advise any franchisee to be part of something like that. Don't try to go at it on your own, and don't just rely on the support you get from within your franchise system. The more you support you get in outside perspectives, the easier it is for you to get your blind spots, to get outside energy, outside input, and that's only going to help the business.
I'd love to talk more about this up and coming work that you'll be offering, but also if we can go back a little bit to teams, because I know that you have a lot of experience in the human elements. I'd love to talk about, I guess, the typical onboarding process. What does it look like? And take the conversation from there. So, what does onboarding look like? Is it once you've recruited and you've selected somebody, and you say, look, is there a trial period? Is it like any other employment agreement arrangement?
Between the franchisee and their employees?
Yes.
Yes, it really is just like any other workspace, and
Hmm.
it varies from franchisee to franchisee. What I'll tell you is in the franchise world, franchisors are reluctant to get involved in staffing and in management for a variety of reasons. Number one, they're not necessarily experts on that. They know how to make pizza and frozen yogurt and pest control and in-home senior care. They're not necessarily experts in management or leading people. That's number one. But the bigger issue is they're very concerned about what's called the joint employer status,
Ah,
where someone, if a McDonald's franchisee in some small town forgets to pay someone overtime, well, if McDonald's corporate is considered a joint employer, instead of just suing their boss, that franchisee, that employee can sue McDonald's corporate, which is what lawyers want.
yes.
So that's called joint employer status. And so because of that, franchisors are very careful and really want little to do with how the franchisees' employees are managed. If they're franchisees independently owned and operated, it's their employees. So consequently, most franchisees don't have any formal leadership or management training. They manage the way they were managed. And maybe their previous employers weren't good role models.
Mm.
So I see a lot of poor management in the franchise world. So to answer your question, the typical onboarding process is not very good. The average franchisee just fills positions. The best franchisees build cultures,
Yep.
and they're very careful and very deliberate about who they bring in because every employee is an ingredient to a recipe, and all it takes is one to ruin the whole meal. So the more sophisticated franchisees, and the way I coach franchisees, it's all about building a culture, focusing not on a candidate who you like, but on a candidate who's qualified because they meet the criteria for what you're looking for. So you're not going with your gut. You're really looking for the specific qualifications that you associate with the position that you're filling. So that's more sophisticated.
Hmm.
Most people are hiring warm bodies because they're stressed out. They got to get the position filled, and they
Hmm.
want to check it off their list.
Yeah, it comes with some consequences for not spending the appropriate amount of time, doesn't it? Now,
Yeah.
I wonder what was the genesis, the spark that I guess put you on a path to creating your book, The Wealthy Franchisee. Why did you write that book?
Well, so I was already a professional speaker before getting into franchising, and that
Mm.
continued while I was a franchisee. But I started getting these invitations to speak at franchise events, and that got bigger and I got better. And then people kind of kept asking. They said, "Hey, that's great. I want more. Do you have a book?" So
Ah,
the market presented itself to me. I knew that there was demand for it. So I wrote a book proposal and got an agent, and they pitched it to publishers. And fortunately, my first choice publisher ended up buying it, which was Entrepreneur Magazine. And so I was off and running. What was great about that is I was able to really formalize the process of understanding what it takes to be a great franchisee. And having a big publisher like that helped because not only was I able to, codify everything that I learned,
Hmm.
that enabled me to get some pretty cool interviews with some pretty big people in the franchise world. I was able to drop the name entrepreneur, and suddenly I was having in-person meetings with some pretty big players in the industry. I was able to pick their brains, and that just made the book better. So, so the book is really about what the best franchisees out there are doing
Hmm.
and what it is that enables them to succeed.
How did you feel when it went live? It was published. Can you recall the moment?
Oh yeah, it was exciting. Although the funny thing is, I got an order for books that I had to fill because I was getting a virtual presentation. They wanted to send everyone a book before my presentation,
No.
but the book wasn't officially released. But I had to beg and plead my publisher to fill this order and send it to this franchise brand. So my client got the book in hand before I saw it. They took a picture and they sent it to me. And I called them. I said, does it feel like a real book? Uh, so they got about 5 days before I got it. But when the box came and I reached inside, admittedly, there's a tear in my eye. And I kept my promise to my parents. The first book I touched, I signed and I sent to them.
Now, in the opening pages of which I've seen, it's for Rachel. Is that correct?
Yes,
Who's Rachel?
Rachel is my wife.
Right.
She's
Fantastic.
the one who gave me her blessing, which is a polite way of saying permission. And I had to do some arm twisting because the idea of, you know, buying a business I knew nothing about with a franchisor I hardly knew with money we didn't have was just crazy for her. I grew up, my father was a serial business owner, so that chaos was normal to me. My wife's father's a college professor who's had two jobs his entire life. So she grew up in a different world. So it took some arm twisting and some persuasion, but ultimately it worked out. And the first time I brought home a box of chocolate covered strawberries for her, it paid off
Well
well.
done. Behind every good man, there is an even greater woman in many
For,
respects.
for sure.
Now, let's move over to the mechanics of when somebody wants to learn more from you, they want to contact you and they want to hopefully work with you. What is that process and where are they going to find you?
So you can easily find me on social media. You can find me on, LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can just Google my name, Scott Greenberg, especially Scott Greenberg speaker or Scott Greenberg franchise. But the easiest thing is just go to my website, which is thewealthyfranchisee.com, thewealthyfranchisee.com. And in terms of what I offer for franchise systems, I obviously do live and virtual presentations. But for individual franchisees, I have a few different offerings. Obviously, one is the book, and it's available wherever books are sold. It's called The Wealthy Franchisee, Game-Changing Steps for Becoming a Thriving Franchise Superstar. I also offer one-on-one coaching for franchisees. So if you want to have someone to bounce ideas off of, to get some consulting from someone who's done it, who's been there, but also understands coaching itself, that is a role I would be thrilled to play with you. But this thing I'm developing now, it's called the Wealthy Franchisee Business Breakthrough Program. I'm so excited about it. It's a 14-week program that involves instruction, it involves coaching, and it mostly involves action. So the book is great. There's lots to learn from it. But this program is interactive where I'm going to give you assignments that are going to help you grow your business. And there's a social aspect to it where you get to be part of a Facebook forum and network and bounce ideas off of other people who are building their businesses and are part of the program. So I'm so excited for this. It's absolutely going to help people make money and take their business to the next level. So all that information will be available on thewealthyfranchisee.com. And if anybody wants to go there, my contact information is there. You can reach out to me and I'll keep you posted on when that resource is available.
You're doing some incredibly important work, Scott, and for everybody who's on the call with us today, as is normally the case, I'll be making all of the links back to Scott and his wonderful programs, the ones that are in existence right now and the ones that are up and coming. And with all that being said, Scott, thank you so very much for spending some time with me on the My Future Business Show today.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.